I turned to trees. I held onto tree limbs when Mamaw died, gripping with white-knuckled sobs too tight for human hands, but bark gripped back with bite to ground me, to pull me out of pinpoint grief, extracting memories like sap from my brain poured out into the forest, where she showed me lobed white oak leaves, oblong pawpaws, gray pillbugs rolled into balls, ways to seek joy in bushes and birds and buds spattered along branches. I held on to tree limbs when I didn't want to love my husband, when we were new to each other and past hurts echoed lies in my ears about who he may be, what he may do, how I may not pick myself back up this time. The rough bark, pulsing xylem and phloem, pulling me back to present, to reality, to the man who already inconvenienced himself again and again solely to see my smile. The man who took me to the woods to touch trees, caress moss, seek fungi in bursts of color after rain, the man who knew them all by name. I held onto tree limbs the first time I witnessed Dad's PTSD rage its way into the softness of his eyes, marring them with terror, and every time after, during fireworks on 4th of July, when he huddled in the car to get away, during our trip to Louisville, when he said the last time he'd walked those streets was right after the draft, during moments I'd say something, sending shock propelling him backward to hurts he never wanted to inflict, to feel, to carry. I held onto tree limbs when I birthed a daughter, tasking myself with raising a woman in a world constantly instructing who she can't be, where she can't go, what she can't or must do with her own body. Roe v. Wade overturned and our rights were stripped as easily as loosened bark on dying trees, shocked like lightning, burning explosions down every arm of that tree out front in a storm last summer. My guts twisted as mycelium, sharing secrets among the roots, but only filled with bile and bad news and fear. This was only the beginning. I held onto tree limbs and roots from woods of childhood, the most beautiful places torn down, fragmented, busted up into gravel, distributed to anyone willing to write a check, spread on driveways, mixed in concrete, scattered across spans of development near and far. The giant pine I bloodied my knees scaling, ash on a pile of forgotten trees, cast away in the breeze. The stream where I caught crawdads and collected hagstones filled with sediment dosed to make way. I still dwell there, propelling back to my most peaceful moments, dancing with wind as my partner, skinny, bruised elbows and shins with no agenda. I hold on to tree limbs now, each time another high school classmate overdoses, leaving an empty seat at someone's next holiday, and each time another shooting sends my kids spiraling in fear for their friends, for their lives, grieving for the absent innocence that should shroud their childhoods. I hold on to tree limbs when water rises to floods, filling our homes, washing away lives, taking all we had, a current carrying our desperate screams on down the creek, whose banks can't hold this trauma. I hold on to tree limbs to recall code written in me there in the woods with Mamaw, written in us all from birth, to touch places we came from, to find moments of solace hoarded in our DNA, peace seated so deep it's woven among the roots of the limbs I cling to, reverberating up right into my fingers, for me to carry back into the throes.
You're listening to Books on the Bed, where I travel through the country asking our hosts, if I came to your town and stayed at your house, what books would you put on my bed? Each host will share 6 books for me to carry with me on the journey of my life. And I'm here to share those books with you. As we go, we're building a digital library with every book put on every bed across the country. And who knows? Maybe someday, the world. We are trying to share as many diverse stories as possible to part a curtain between us and bring us closer to each other. We hope these books and conversations make a meaningful difference in your life. Thank you for listening and being with us on this journey. I'm actually astounded at how many revelations I have almost per week working at City Lights, of writers in Appalachia that I didn't know about before I moved here. I think that's what's fun about working at the bookstore. And then people will reach out to do events at City Lights that I've never heard of.
Yeah.
And then I'll fall in love with their work, It's perfect because I get to bring in people that, like you, that I just wanted to have read. And I really thank you for spending the weekend at City Lights and
it was a phenomenal weekend. I couldn't think of a better way to turn 40. It was really
so cool.
Just a beautiful weekend. I got to do this incredible literary road trip with some really dear friends, and we got to go to the To Belong Here book release in Hazard, which is another book I should have put in my stack. It's in the TBR stack on my desk currently, but that was a lovely event down at the art station in Hazard, and then we drove out to City Lights and read and had a wonderful time at that art festival too. That was pretty incredible. And then we went into Asheville for the Hellbender Gathering of Poets reading at Malaprops, and I think I saw you there too. And
that's a really good Appalachian book trip.
It was one of the best weekends of my life.
Really? Oh, yes, I'm so glad to hear that.
It was great.
And what a trio with you, Melissa and Doug. I was just so delighted to meet them, especially when I found out Melissa's roots in Ohio. Do you remember when we were talking about that we might have seen each other at the Renaissance festivals in Dayton?
Yeah.
And never have known it? That still creeps me out. I mean, it's just such a strange thing to think about. Life is very weird. But, obviously to thank you for coming down there and thank you for doing this, Books on the Bed. You know the drill. I got to give you books.
Oh.
So we're going to start with the gifts that I got you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Once again, a very difficult thing to do. Buy gifts for someone who has read a lot and is a great poet. And it's like, oh, what if I mess up? But I think I got ones that you didn't read and that you'll really love. So
okay. Oh, exciting. Okay. I wonder can I sit this down?
Yeah.
Okay.
Feel free to.
I'm just terrified of breaking stuff.
No, it's okay.
Okay, there we go. Because I'm going to need two hands to do this.
So let's have you open the poetry book first.
Oh, is that
this
one?
That one. So.
Okay. And I also really love this wrapping paper, so I got to do the thing that I always did, even as a child, where I try to save it because I might use it for a collage. Yeah,
you got to you got to reuse. It's great wrapping paper.
It is beautiful.
But for people that are listening and you, the reason I chose this book is because of what you're doing with the Appalachian women farmers right now.
Yeah.
And centering women's stories. And so this is Raisa Tolchinsky, who is a future Books on the Bed participant. Glassjaw, this poetry collection, is the perspective of women boxers.
Oh, wow.
And Raisa was an amateur women's boxer in New York. And right now she's at Harvard at the Divinity School, but she's moving to Bloomington, Indiana in a couple of months. And so I'm going to go eventually visit her there. But I just figured, first of all, Raisa's incredible. You're going to love her poetry. And I'd never read an anthology centered on women boxers before. Yeah. So I think that you will appreciate the poems that are in this book. And
thank you.
She's brilliant and just a really special collection.
Oh, I can't wait to read this. And now I'm thinking of another book that I wish I had. There's so many books I wanted to bring to choose 6 books.
It's hard.
It's so hard. And I feel like on any given day, there would be 6 different books.
See, but that's why I love it. I have people switch them out in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter what 6. The whole point is you're just sharing it with this random guy that's coming.
And this book that I'm thinking of, and I can't even remember the title of it, and I'm going to have to get it. I know where it is on my bookshelf in my head. I know where this one is. It focuses on the women who helped unionize the mines. And it's it's really old. It was written in the 70s.
Huh.
So I'll have to get it down and look at after this because my brain will not remember the title.
That's okay.
I already know I don't remember the title.
I forget titles and even authors' names sometimes.
I know that this is the book and I can think of where it is on my shelf, but that's all I got.
Yeah. Well, I almost got you Barbara Kingsolver's Holding the Line.
Ah.
And awesome. I didn't know if you.
Well, I have all of Barbara Kingsolver's work.
That's why I figured.
Actually, that's why Prodigal Summer is in my almost stack because that's a book I've read at various phases of my life that keeps having an impact on me. And I read it right before I got pregnant with my son.
Wow.
And so it kind of sticks with me. And when it came down to having to narrow it down to the 6, it's in the almost stack.
Hey, almost is good enough. But yeah, the 6, it doesn't matter. It's just let's share books, and the gifts are part of this too. So the second one is bringing yet another region to Appalachia, this time the Pacific Northwest.
Awesome.
And a really important indigenous essay collection among many that have come out, memoirs, essay collections the last few years.
Ooh.
The cover alone is just awesome.
It's beautiful.
But Thunder Song, Sasha LaPointe.
Thank you.
I think there are a lot of themes in this book that will resonate with you based on not only your poetry, but how you live and where you live and the things that you think about on a daily basis. There's a lot of Indigenous authors writing really cool stuff, and my goal is to continue to share those across regions, because I think so many of us have so many things in common when we think about the climate.
Oh, yeah.
And our history and how it's still affecting us today, our inability to reconcile with how we've treated Indigenous cultures and Black people and immigrants in general. So I just think that this collection will be one that sticks with you.
I'm very excited about that. That's Joy Harjo, some of her work, and I was looking to see if it made it into this. There's another stack by my couch that was like the almost stack.
I'm going to start officially calling it that. The almost stack and the almost stack.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And there's a lot of Joy Harjo in there because her poetry, for the way that it speaks about those things, is very resonant with me.
One of the reasons I get gifts from all over the country to bring to different regions is because there is a shared heart in these works. You just might not get to it because we're all and we have so many good Appalachian writers to read.
Oh, yeah.
That we could just do that our whole life.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we branch out a little bit?
I love to see the ways that themes cross between regions and cross between like rural spaces and urban spaces. The Pacific Northwest and Appalachia, I'm sure there are things that are going to overlap and things that are going to be similar but different. And so that's always exciting. I'm excited to read those.
So yeah, thank you. And I hope you enjoy those books. And I want to start because this is a really cool place that we're doing this conversation. This part of Kentucky is really important to you. You grew up in Moorhead, just 40 minutes down the road, where I stayed last night. Your husband's from here in this land in Carter County. Can you tell people where we're at and the significance to you?
Yeah, so we are in my art studio on the farm where I live with my husband and my 2 kids and our menagerie of animals. And so this studio was my husband Channing's grandfather's chicken coop. Back when his grandparents lived in the house that we live in. And this land, my children are the 6th generation to live here. And I feel like that, that's really important. Like, I don't have that for my own family lineage land. A lot of people don't have that. And so what a privilege, what a significant gift to be able to give them. And something that I think about a lot, too, is there were so many folks and people in this space before that family was, that I will never really even know about. And I think about that a lot when I'm out in our woods doing things. We try to practice good stewardship. We do a lot of agroforestry and forest management practices that are good for the native species here in the Appalachian woods of Northeast Kentucky. And we also live 5 miles from Carter Cave State Park, which is, I'm very biased, but it's my favorite state park.
Anywhere or just in Kentucky?
Really anywhere. I have a lot.
It seems really cool.
It's a beautiful place, and I have a lot of memories tied to that park in general throughout my life. Schools, of course, love to take field trips there because it's close enough, but it's also got beautiful caves, beautiful geography, beautiful hiking trails, limestone cliffs, sandstone cliffs. It's got a little bit of everything. And to be close to that, like, I get to take my kids over there often. I take my dogs over there sometimes to walk on the trails, because even though we have all this land, it's not always a good idea for me to let them run off leash, especially the puppy who's still training and doesn't have good recall yet. So it's a privilege to have access to that space as well. And so being in this place, we lived in Oklahoma for 5 years, from 2009 to 2014, and both of my kids were born out there. And so, of course, the only thing that we thought we wanted to do when we were younger was to get out of Appalachia, and then all we could think about was, well, how do we move home?
Tale as old as time.
Yes, absolutely. We lived that stereotype. But it was important for us to bring our kids here and to have them grow up in this space, even though it was a hard decision, and sometimes it's a hard place to live.
Yeah. Well, and I am always so fascinated by that circular story. And I can't tell you how many Appalachians across both podcasts, or just Southerners, Mississippians, same thing. You want to leave, and then all you do is ache to come back, despite the complications and the difficulties that come with it. In part, it seems like people want to be a part of making these places right? Good places to live. I think about Mandy Scheffel
Yeah.
all the time. Her story inspires me constantly to, even though I'm not from Silva or Franklin, I want to make these communities places where everybody feels like they can come. And that similar to, the trio of poets that come, like anybody that comes, I want them to leave feeling like, wow, that was beautiful. Look at all these friends we made. I want people to know Appalachia as a place that they should come and that they leave holding these dear memories. But it's completely different when you have the epigenetic attachment to these places that you and your family have and so many other writers. But I am curious about that stint in Oklahoma, because the story about you taking the dirt from, was it your family farm?
No, it was my parents' garden. So we always had a garden when I was growing up. And one story I love to tell, my original childhood home was eminent domain to build a bypass through Moorhead, the US 60 bypass, because they didn't want driveways and stuff entering on the bypass. So when the state took our house and we had to find a new place to live, which is where my parents still live, it's a little bit out of Moorhead in a smaller area called Clearfield. My mom, they told my parents, we'll move anything that you want. And so my mom said, anything? You mean anything? And they were like, yeah, anything. And so she said, oh, I want my garden dirt. I want my soil from my garden. I've worked so hard to make this good growing soil. And so they hauled dump truck loads of my parents' garden dirt to our new house.
That's incredible.
So that is the garden dirt. Like, that's the dirt. When I was pregnant with my son, we visited Kentucky. When I was 7 months pregnant, I think, to have a baby shower with the family because it was our first child.
Yeah.
He wasn't supposed to happen. My husband had testicular cancer and was told he would never have a child. So we were not anticipating becoming parents. It was this huge, amazing surprise.
How beautiful.
Very life-altering. But I decided, I was very heartbroken that my child wouldn't be born in Kentucky because it's an important place to me. I'm a Kentuckian through and through, and especially my part of Kentucky and Appalachia. And so I took a mason jar of dirt home with me to Oklahoma, and I thought, I'll put it under my bed in the delivery room and my child can be born over Kentucky soil. And then we forgot it, of course, in the hurry to get out the door and the panic of, I think I'm in labor. And I didn't realize it until after he was born. And it was this heartbreaking moment that I had where it just didn't happen. But it's okay. I have Okie children.
Yeah.
Who, funny enough, he was 3 when we moved back here, but he still loves the wind. He has this weird relationship with the wind because it was always windy out there. And so he still, to this day, will be like, oh, I love the wind. And I'm like, I hate it. I don't enjoy it. But he does. So.
That's so interesting what children of a certain landscape remember or take with them. It's very weird. I lived similarly in Nebraska, rural Nebraska, for a year and a half when I was, 3-4 years old. And yet, every time I drive out there, my goal is to see a sunset because there's nothing like a Nebraska sunset. There's nothing like a Dakota's sunset. I mean, it is fire red over this flat land. And there's something about that big fireball sinking into that flat landscape that is unlike anything, including the mountains.
Yeah.
I don't get the same feeling of a sunset in the mountains that I do from out there.
Yeah, it's really interesting, those things that imprint on us so early in our formative years, because it's like being out west out there. I felt absolutely panicked all the time. I felt like I was out in the open and that everything could see me and that I could see everything that I did not want to see.
It's unsettling, isn't it?
It's unsettling. And I missed the mountains. But,
You're where are the trees?
Yeah. And when we moved back home and we're driving, my son's like, why are we in a tunnel? And I'm like, baby, those are the hills.
Yeah.
We're not in a tunnel.
Get used to it.
Yeah.
You're going to be completely swallowed by these things, everywhere you go. But I think that's what's so interesting about your journey. Oklahoma is pretty much the polar opposite of Appalachia. And I mean, even if you think historically, one of the reasons it was hard to settle there is because everybody that came from the East had no idea what to do with that climate and landscape. Oklahoma, I mean, I guess Eastern Oklahoma, there's some similarities with the hills on the river, but it's just completely different. So you feel lost.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised, but I'm curious the things you missed most. When you felt unsettled, did you ever kind of, daydream about these things that would calm you from your Kentucky home?
Well, I got really fortunate. We lived in a little 600 square foot house on the edge of town, and we had a big yard. And we had a very, very kind landlord who we got to have a garden. We had mulberry trees in our yard, and he rented the pasture behind it to people who had horses. So there were horses in our backyard,
Oh,
too.
that's cool.
So I kind of had this little oasis spot, and we had a couple of big, like, bur oak trees in our yard, which we don't have a lot of those here. They have the giant acorns, but they were beautiful trees. And so I could go out in my yard and sit with these trees. And I could walk out back by the horse pasture. And so I could have like this little reprieve, and we were kind of in central Oklahoma. And it was fascinating to me because Channing taught field botany because his whole background is in botany.
Yeah.
And he was the TA for the field botany class, helping teach those classes. So I got to go on their field trips with them that year.
Oh,
and they go
cool.
to the four corners of Oklahoma, which are all very different. Like that. That's what really got to. I was so busy the first year being distracted by like all of these different ecosystems and ecoregions and different things that were happening that it took me a little while to really be like, whoa. Like, I do miss home. And then it was worse when I had the kids because then it was like, oh, well, they're getting these experiences that are very opposite of the experiences I had in childhood. And so once they were born, I really started to feel that pull to home because up until that, it was more of like this exciting adventure and I knew it wasn't forever.
Well, I think it would be natural for a parent to want to share what they love and know.
Yeah.
And when you're in a place that you don't know or love, how do you transfer that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that something that made you anxious about that? Is it like, this is unfamiliar land. What am I supposed to pass on here?
Yeah.
Whereas here.
Sort of, yeah. There was no, like, other than the memories that we made while we were there, I didn't really feel like a tie to that place, especially the way that I do here. But I'll say that when we were moving, and we had to leave the house where I brought my children home from the hospital, I realized that, like, I actually do have a pool there now that I didn't have before. Because
but that's special.
And it is special. And, I learned a lot while I was in Oklahoma. I learned a lot about the Native nations out there. I learned a lot that I didn't learn in history class in my very colonial constructed history throughout school. And I really appreciate those things that I learned while I was out there about that on a very, I feel like when you're in spaces where history happened and you're talking with real people who are still alive today, who are impacted by the things that happened, it's a very different way to learn history than reading it from a book, from someone else's perspective, where it was altered to maybe give you the impression that the author wants you to have.
The obfuscations of history, especially in Oklahoma, are actually incredible, the lengths they go to lie. I'm curious on those field trips, did you go to Miami and Pitcher up in the northeast corner?
The field trips for those was primarily to look at plants. So they were going to field sites to do, like, to key out native plants and to look at, well, what grows here, what's the geography like, and what plants are growing here versus, like, the other parts.
Yeah.
So I am familiar with the mining that took place up there and the Superfund site that exists. I forgot what the documentary was called, but there was a documentary I watched about it and the whole town that they had to move because of the lead poisoning left behind.
I'm going to try to share, I don't know if it's public yet, but a friend of mine, Lauren Waters, did a documentary called Meet Me at the Creek about Rebecca Jim, a Cherokee elder in Miami, who has been working for decades to save Tar Creek.
Okay. Yeah, Tar Creek, I think that might have been the title of the documentary even. It was Tar Creek something. Okay.
So I have like this strange web of connections growing in that area because a writer in Minnesota, Catherine Savage, who I don't think I gave her book to you. Maybe it was Melissa. No, I gave her Carrie by Tony Jensen when you were at City Lights. But regardless, Catherine wrote about her issues at a Superfund site or brownfield site in Minneapolis, where I used to live in St. Paul. So I was familiar with this. I was like, okay, well, I want to read about what it was like for her growing up there. And then her partner at the time was in Tulsa, and so she spent time in Pitcher in Miami, and she eventually became friends with Rebecca Jim. And so then when I was preparing for my interview with Catherine, I was looking at Rebecca Jim and her story a little bit more, found this documentary, had Lauren come out to screen it in Western North Carolina when she was already coming to Cherokee. And then now I'm going up to Rhode Island later this year to interview Vanessa Lilly, who wrote a mystery book called Blood Sisters that takes place in Oklahoma, in Miami, Pitcher, where she grew up.
Oh,
And so
wow.
now she's away, but she's
Yeah.
writing home.
Oh my goodness.
So there's just like all
I'm
these.
gonna have to read that. Like
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
you should. And it's one of, because it's about missing Indigenous women.
Yeah.
And so starts with this archaeologist in Rhode Island, where she lives now, who goes back home because she is now tied up in this missing persons case that she was specifically requested for. And so there's just corruption with the BIA and the local police force, and it's about building homes on the land, stolen land of Indigenous people. And so like there's just so much. Anyway,
Yeah.
I digress. But I was partly excited to talk about this because you understand more than most people, because you lived there, the history in Oklahoma. And I think it's important to share, even if you're not from there.
Yeah,
you know?
well, and I think that's one of the things with sharing work from different regions and across regions. It builds these connections and these understandings, which is what makes art so important and crucial, especially in times like these.
Well, and I was with Naomi Shihab Nye thinking about your work in San Antonio because of, her interest in being a good steward of the environment. Vanessa Lilly is from this place in Oklahoma that has been decimated by mining, left for Indigenous people to die and have astronomical numbers of lead poisoning because of the water, orange water in these waterways. So I just thought like, man, there's just so much that you all connected on because Eastern Kentucky is no stranger to extraction and being left behind by people who just take, the environment be damned. And I want to say, out of places, your poetry, it would be hard to find a poetry book that more powerfully illustrates the anxiety and horror of living in this time of climate crisis, and also our natural persistence to find the small joys and beauty in the midst of all of that. I mean, it is an incredible collection, truly. You should be proud of what you did. I think so many people, when they read that, you can't help but be like, oh my God, yeah, this is what I feel. And even deeper, right? I mean, it brings you into like this just strange amalgam of horror and joy and beauty and anxiety. And I loved the book. Oh. That's why I asked you to come to City Lights, because I think it's really important. And I'd like to have you read something, or maybe even a couple of things that I highlighted so that people can understand why I would say such a thing, about how you capture these feelings that are pretty much ubiquitous throughout the U.S. You just happen to be able to speak more to your own story. And this is what I was talking about with Damon Young, even writing humor. Write your story. Don't try to make it universal. Yeah. Right? When you're in Kentucky, people can still empathize with what's going on here because they'll be like, oh yeah, I feel that in Oklahoma. Yeah, I feel that in Washington.
I was very fortunate. I had a lot of mentors who, especially Rebecca Gilhow, whom I give a lot of credit to for where I'm at now in my writing journey, who always says, like, write to the specific, like, write your thing, because it's going to be relatable to someone if it's specific to you. Whereas if you try to make things universal, it gets lost. And so I really appreciate, that's one of the things, too, about Appalachian Writers and the Appalachian Writers Workshop, where I've been so fortunate to work with amazing folks that I admire and respect, and have helped guide me in, being able to do that and to be vulnerable and to tell my truth. That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, and that's why I'm always astounded and so appreciative of poets and writers. I'm looking at Anne Pancake. I think with that vulnerability, people can also feel free to express what they're feeling inside. People think that, especially with the climate crisis, oh, we're talking about it too much, or you're being dramatic. And it's, but in these poems, it's like, especially with what happened in Helene in Western North Carolina and the forest fires, it's everywhere.
Yeah, we just had a tornado in Somerset, London, and Kentucky over the weekend that killed several folks and devastated communities. Took everything away from many others, and they're going to be impacted by that for many years to come, just as Southeast Kentucky is still recovering from the 2022 flooding, just as North Carolina is still going to be recovering from Helene.
St. Louis just got decimated, northern Alabama. just got decimated. I mean, it seems like every time you go online at this point. So it's not like we're paying attention to the wrong things. You'd have to be dead not to understand how scary this is right now.
It's relentless. It is relentless. And it is the anxiety that comes with that too. And every time, every time there's that forecast now, it's a real, like your whole body feels it.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, there are two poems that I think highlight how you capture the crisis and still finding that beauty in the world. The first is The Midst of Crisis. Okay. Would you mind reading that one?
Sure. The midst of crisis. Balmy dusk. Lightning bugs are out after a pop-up storm, but no whippoorwills yet this year. I'm exhausted, unable to sleep, kept awake with images from the news. Headlines, cries of agony, predictions. I'm holding my breath again, wondering if I'll know when we're living the last tender moments.
That last line haunts me. Aren't we all thinking that? Yeah, Aren't we all wondering?
I don't know how you're not. You're just watching the rhythms of the seasons change. Like the spring ephemerals were so early this year. Everything seems a little out of whack. Like right now, it feels like fall outside, but it's not yet summer. And I know it can get chilly in the spring, but there's a different tinge to the air.
I literally, when I was driving here, I was like, this felt like October when I was up near Boone a couple years ago. Like it was the same feeling, but it's green and not leaf peeping season. Right. It's very strange.
I've been very off and bothered by that the past couple days.
Well, and then the other one that highlights the other side of this, I remain amazed.
Okay. I remain amazed. Gooseberries are just coming on like small green beach balls I'd imagined in childhood as I waited for them to ripen in a rush of purple, but sneaking a few early because I liked how they made my mouth pucker. The catalpa trees by the pond are blooming cotton candy flowers, contrasting azure skies, mirroring these billowing clouds we make into shapes of bears and boats and dragons on bright summer days. Fleabane and clover flowers cover the ground in small bursts of beauty, blooms clumped in pockets all around the yard, bees zigzag paths to visit each one as I step around admiring these small wonders I grew up knowing.
Beautiful.
Oh, thank you. It's interesting. Those are two that I have not read at any events, so it's interesting that you chose those.
Well, I try to go with just what stuck out to me. It's like anything. There are definitely other poems in here that are just as powerful, but I think the one thing about this book is it felt like, as a reader, you're experiencing your inner world of fear and anxiety and stress, and then also these moments where you're breathing and feeling all of these things that are alive and still beautiful despite the crisis.
Writing poetry and writing in this way is what's keeping me sane. It's literally saving me. And so when I'm writing, it's usually to process something that's happening, but also to look to where I can find comfort, to where I can find peace, which always happens outside. It always happens in nature. And so it is really just me kind of, I guess, treading water here in the climate collapse and looking to the things that I can find that save me. And I think that's something like I've heard said a lot recently, joy is resistance, and I believe that wholeheartedly. They want us, and they being like whoever, is in...
The oppressors.
The oppressors, yeah. That they want us to be scared. They want us to be confused. They want to drive us apart. And so for me, it's more crucial than ever to find those things that make me feel delight, that make me feel joy, that make me feel connected to my community and to others. And so I think that also acknowledging that anxiety exists, that I am scared, that's also important because it's not going to go away. Mm-hmm. And ignoring those types of things only makes it worse.
Well, art helps us not bottle it up.
Yeah.
You can share it in a way that's intimate when you're writing it, but then it ends up on these pages, and then you can see that other people also share that feeling.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely, and especially in current times when a lot of people are turning to AI and relying on it to write or to make art. And I'm like, to me, that's not really art because art is made in community. Art is, I write for myself first, but then when I want to share it. I bring it into these spaces. I refine it. I share it with close writer friends, and then I put it out into the world. And to me, AI is hollow. It's like the junk food.
Yep.
And I don't want to see it drive us further apart, which is what I feel like it does, because it takes away the work of the art, which is the art. Like the work of crafting that poem, of getting it out of my head onto the page, of then whittling it down, of then reshaping it, of then sharing it and refining it. Like all of that is part of that process. And you don't get that when you're putting it to that. And, you know, not even thinking about the environmental impact of all of that, which is my biggest reason why I don't like it. But I also don't like what it does in terms of isolating us further.
Yeah, this kind of poetry that you write is nourishing because there's something that went into it. Hard work, long days. And that's not even just the writing of it, it's the living. You can feel the living in a work like this. You can't do that in something from AI. Yeah. Just in the ways you can't, when somebody doesn't put effort into something. You can feel it. Yeah. And so I think that's why the strength of this book comes out in the fact that, like, you're really pouring yourself out there. And I just really appreciate it. And I'll be happy to share this with as many people as I can. Another thing that came out in your work that I know is going to be important moving forward, too, with your new project, which I think you're able to talk about with the Mountain Women's Anthology.
I can talk about it.
But like your ancestors and women, you know, in the poem where you're talking about walking in the woods and hearing these voices, they're not there, but they're there. It just feels like the women and ancestors that came before you are really vital to you keeping going, not only with the farming and your family and all of that, but the writing. I'm curious about the inspiration of the women in your life from Appalachia, not only in your daily life, but then now with this new anthology of mountain women farmers. I mean, there has to be a connection there of why you're trying to share these modern day stories of mountain women.
Yeah. I mentioned we had a garden growing up like we always did. Many childhood summers, I would be in the kitchen with my mama while she was canning beans. We'd string beans on the porch and go. And I just remember, you know, the box fan being on, the air temperature was sticky. Like there was a certain smell to like the green beans canning, or we'd be making kraut, and that's how, you know, my grandmother lived through the Great Depression. That's how she fed herself. That's how my family fed ourselves. That's how I feed my children. And, you know, fortunately, we don't have to rely on the garden now. We could buy things at the store, but we prefer not to, much for the same reason of, like, I feel like it's more nourishing and meaningful if I do it myself. So the women, like the stories that I knew of my granny, the stories that I knew of my mama, and all of those things that went into making me who I am, well, now I feel like in a lot of ways those stories aren't being shared everywhere. And there's so many women farmers that I worked with over the years. I spent a couple years working for a nonprofit called Community Farm Alliance, which is a wonderful nonprofit that does great work to support small farms across the state of Kentucky. A lot of the farmers I was working with were women, or, you know, if they weren't women-owned farms run by women, there were still women involved that were, you know, married to, doing just as much work as their husband. But then when people think about farming, when they think about a farmer, of course, the picture you get in your head is a white man in overalls, and especially if you're thinking about farmers in Appalachia. And I really want to counter that narrative because most of the people doing the work to grow our food do not look like that, and many of them are women. And historically, you know, women get a lot of credit for cooking food, for preserving food, for feeding people, but it's not talked about as much the work that they're doing from seed to table, to get the food grown, to get the food out of the garden. You know, it might be mentioned here and there, but I really want to explore further those narratives and those stories of the women whose hands are in the dirt to feed us.
Well, and when it comes out, you know that you have friends at City Lights that'll share it far and wide. Because I know for a fact, in Western North Carolina, people are going to want to read this book too. This is a service to people. I think a lot of people have felt the way you do about, well, where are these stories? You know, women farmers, yeah, they're all over the place. But but what about them sharing the work that they've done in their lives. I think it's an incredible project. I'm super excited about it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
My deadline to UPK is December, so
It's coming up.
it's coming
See,
up.
it seems like it's far away.
It's not. It's so close.
Especially with all the other things that you're doing in your life. But I think what a great thing to put your effort toward.
Yeah.
Because in the end, you're going to be uplifting all of these voices that you've heard throughout your life. And now everybody else is going to get a chance to hear them. And isn't that what it's about? Well, we've talked about, women inspiring you and you sharing those stories, but I want to give ample time to your awesome collection of books on the bed here.
So like I said, it was so difficult to choose 6 books. There are so many books that have impacted me and still continue to impact me. Yeah, the first one I have is The Book of Delights by Ross Gay. This book is really important to me because when I was writing Who You Grow Into, which I didn't set out to write, it's a book that kind of happened organically. I was in a COVID garden workshop with Rebecca Gale Howell in the fall of 2020 that she did across Zoom. And I know it was through Apple Shop, and thanks to National Endowment for the Arts, we came together and talked about growing food in times of COVID. And one of the exercises that she had us do was to read sections of the Book of Delights. And every day we sat down and wrote 200 or 300 words about something that brought us delight that day. And at that time, for me, that was revolutionary. That changed my mindset in such a good way because I was so focused on the doom. I was kind of in my little anxiety ditch, and I was determined that, we don't know what's going to happen. It was so scary, and it pulled me out of that. It made me realize that this is where a lot of my poetry now comes from too, like looking for those things that make you feel delight and joy, make you feel alive, it gives you reasons. It rewires your brain when you're thinking about what am I grateful for, what gives me gratitude, and what a better way to live for me than to be stuck in that, well, everything is awful. Because it's really easy to look out into the world and see awful things. But when you start focusing on all these little things, it starts to get easy to see all of the really wonderful things that are also out in the world. And I think acknowledging that dichotomy, has become really important for me, and looking at the ways that those things interplay. So this is a very important book to me.
Oh my God. I'm actually surprised Ross Gay has not come up yet in Books on the Bed. So this is a really great first. What an incredible book. And I think, that you have a lot of poems of delight. Mm-hmm. So you can feel that. And I think that's what drew me to it. I oddly was drawn to the ones based in being scared, because there's a comfort in that shared thing too. But poetry and the Book of Delights, these things are reminders for you to watch differently, to listen differently. How many times do you hear somebody talk about, oh man, I was at this coffee shop or at the grocery store and there was some asshole that cut somebody off or was being mean to somebody. But I'm sure you could listen and hear an equally beautiful thing that happens between people in the same space. Mm-hmm. So some of it is, I guess, luck. Do you see something that's beautiful versus ugly? But a lot of it is a choice, or at least the ability to be open to the fact that there are things other than ugliness in the world. And it's easy to see. I mean, gosh, driving here, it was hard not to stop in a million different places to just look at a creek or this tree that was just beautiful. Sometimes it feels like, gosh, it's a daydream out here. When you're stuck, COVID was really hard for a lot of us. And I'm so glad that you had a book like this to help you continue to see the things that are beautiful, even in a really scary, difficult time. I'm curious if there's any passage that you picked out that you would want to share from this book?
Let me see. I was trying to think about that. Like, really, any part of it that you open is beautiful. I just love the whole mission that he had. It was his 42nd birthday, so he was going to write one delight for each day that entire year. He talks about stacking delights, and that's really great. But I like the part about fireflies, so I'll read a little part about that. 84 Fireflies. Just beyond the pear tree, already wealthy with sun-blushed fruitlets, is an alcove of trees, a dense black screen made by the walnuts and maples that is, for these lucky weeks, pierced by the lumen-tummied bugs, one of which landed on my neck earlier today, crawling down my arm to my hand, balancing itself when I brought it closer by throwing open the bifurcated tape its wings make. How common a creature it seems before its cylindrical torso starts glowing intermittently, at which point it is all of strangeness and beauty in one small body. What is the opposite of anthropomorphism? That's what I mean to do.
Wow. I love that last line.
Yeah.
Whoo!
Yeah, because it's, we get so wrapped up in making things like human like us that we forget how amazing things are that are not like us.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the same principle of trying, white people wanting other people to be white. Mm-hmm. Anytime you're trying to make something like yourself, then you're kind of missing the gift.
Yeah.
Is that these things are completely apart from us, and how delightful.
Right. Like, let it be what it is and enjoy.
It's a release from being human, when you're focusing on something that isn't.
Absolutely.
Just you reading that reminded me of this line. I don't think there's a poem I don't like in this collection, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you.
Like, I could have technically picked any of them to reference. That's how good this is.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That's quite a compliment. I
sit here observing fireflies, contemplating what it's like to die.
Yeah, I do that a lot.
That line stopped me in my tracks. I was like, wow, in rap, they call that a bar. Yeah, that was incredible.
Well, thank you.
But yeah, fireflies are referenced multiple times.
Oh, yeah. They're one of the things, we have hundreds of species of fireflies. And actually, Annie Woodford posted on social media this morning about some fireflies at her house that were coming out that continue glowing. And there's a wonderful field guide that I have that's like fireflies of the southeastern United States, and it's like the history of them as well, and it's like a super
awesome.
Thick, amazing book. But it kind of helps because we have some synchronous ones here on the farm in small populations,
I can't even imagine
which people
out here.
go to the Smokies to see, but we have them here.
Yep.
It may be a different species, but they're one of the synchronous ones.
See, that's the beauty of living away from things, is you get things that most people have to drive very far to see.
Yeah.
And they're right here in your backyard.
Of course, I have to drive very far to the grocery store.
Yeah,
so there's a trade-off.
I know. I'd rather have the fireflies, though.
Oh, yeah. Obviously.
Yeah. That's so cool. That's a really, really great start. Well, and you mentioned Annie Woodford. Is that an Annie Woodford book in your stack there?
It sure is.
Let's go to number 2.
So Where You Come From Is Gone. I, of course, related to this collection so much when I read it. So I guess I met Annie at the Appalachian Writers Workshop, and I hadn't read this one until ASA 2023.
Wow.
So the Appalachian Studies Conference. It was in Athens that year. And I can't remember if this one won the Weatherford in 2022. But I bought this at ASA, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful collection. I relate to every single one of them because, it's very much like all the things that make this place haunting and painful, but also beautiful. All the things that are wrong, but also all the things that are right. It's all woven into this in such a lovely way.
In this collection, what are some of the themes that resonated most with you, that you felt that connection with?
Just like looking at the working class people and like the way that white supremacy is woven in to the structure of how we live and exist, and in our poverty and in like these places, and how we're divided so much and so intentionally by certain things to kind of keep us fighting with each other. And the way that it's something you don't notice until you notice it. And then once you see it, you start seeing it everywhere. And I think that this does a good job of pulling out some of those issues, but also like not just looking at the issues, but looking at the things that exist there alongside it that are beautiful. So it's like we have all these problems and all these issues, but still there's some things in this place that are lovely.
Yeah.
Despite all of this and the mess of humans and the mess that humans continue to make.
Yeah.
And so it kind of, to me, I of course love dichotomies, and I love to see someone explore both the hard things and also the beautiful things, and the ways that they're woven together, so that sometimes the things that are difficult, the things we don't want to talk about, are deeply embedded into those places and the structures that we exist within.
Yeah. I'm curious if there's a poem that you'd like to highlight in here that can draw people in so that people know.
I think the one that I chose to, it also is tied to the Breyer sermon. Um,
Oh, I love that. I love the Briar Sermon. Shouts out Elin Justice in Pikeville, Kentucky.
yeah.
She was the one that put me on to
Okay.
Jim
And I
Wayne
think
Miller and the Briar Sermon.
I said, didn't Jim talk about Jim Wayne Miller too?
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like
and I
listened-
actually gave one of Jim Wayne Miller's books to Charles Baxter
Okay.
in Minneapolis.
Awesome.
Talking about bringing regions to different regions.
Okay.
I freaking love Jim
Yes,
Wayne Miller.
so the Briar Sermon is very important to the Appalachian Writers Workshop, to the history of it, to all of us there. I'm sure you've probably heard about that ritual.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So this one is called I Must Be Born Again, a love poem for the briar. I want to walk into your land by taking the creek, slogging, streamwise, into your acreage, since I can't get there no other way. Skirts hitched around my knees, a pair of waterlogged sneakers making me sure-footed on slick rocks. I'll go in through sycamores, the roadbed of what I won't get. I'll never be a speckled trout, crawdad, coyote lapping stars in dark water. But I hear the bent note of your vowels, somewhere cedars sleep, the only way there through stone and stream, the bank overhung by rhododendrons so thick everything is shadow, moss, and watercall. And you wouldn't know the creek was here unless you knew the creek was here, or could follow underneath the wind shifting the trees and your own loud steps and leaves a pouring sound.
Whew. Gosh, that was a good one.
Yeah. And so everything about that, that could be my place.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's many places tucked into the hills across Appalachia. It's like there's so many reclusive spots and places that you only know about if you know about them. And there's something about that, it also that speaks to a lot of it's that beauty, but it's also the racism that you only know about the racism if you know about it. And that's what I'm talking about of this dichotomy that's woven into this is it's like that there's that beauty in that poem that I chose to share, but there's also all that other stuff that's you only know if you know.
And I think knowing is better.
Yes. Oh,
in
absolutely.
all ways,
And this
no matter what it
this
is.
collection does a beautiful job of exploring that. And so and Annie is a wonderful human being as well. So I'm always happy
I have
to
yet to
share her
meet
work.
Annie yet. So many people talk about her.
Okay, well, you need to meet Annie.
I know. And it would be cool to get her to City Lights at some point, too.
Yeah.
I need to think of a good maybe trio or quartet of poets that could read with her. But gosh, yeah, that poem it's so vivid. I'm not from Appalachia, but I felt it the same as how I can just recall, you only know it's there if you know that it's there. Mm-hmm. And there's something really special about that, it's a secret.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that it's tied to the Briar Sermon because you must be born again. And it's once you start realizing these things and becoming, I want to say, a better person.
Yeah, shed yourself
yes.
those lies or, misinformation or things you didn't know.
Yeah.
Right? The more you know, you can't help but become a new person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, too, we're always told certain things about, people who struggle with substance abuse. We're told certain things about certain classes of people, certain races of people, certain religions of people. We're told the things that will divide us and that, when you really look into that, it's not true. It's things that you're told to divide you. And so I think that this collection does a beautiful job exploring those things and exploring the structures, like I said, that we exist under that hold those things up and how we can work to do better, to be better, to acknowledge them and then tear them down.
Yeah, gosh, these are two really great ones. And I'm just realizing none of these authors have been shared yet.
Oh, well, good. Yay.
And what you were just saying, I feel leads really well into Nima's book. If you want to go there next.
Okay, sure.
I don't want to decide for you.
No, any of them, I had them stacked in order of size.
Yeah.
Because that's how they're easier to carry.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. I get you. I do the same. But yeah, do you want to talk about this book?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually read this book out loud to my family on a camping trip. We were traveling in the car down to Big South Fork. A couple of years ago. And so I read it out loud in the car and read it while we were camping, and we finished it up on that weekend trip. And it is gorgeous. I felt like Nima was right there talking to us, telling us her story, sharing, we were sitting on the porch. It's so beautifully conversational and easy to read and just oh my gosh, the depth of all of these stories and her journey growing up in West Virginia.
It's an incredible story.
It's an incredible story. And I feel like she just, I need to read it again. It's been a little while, but it impacted me deeply because it was like, I've never read a memoir where I felt like the person was just like sitting with me as my friend.
Wow.
And like telling me in that way. And I had just met Nima. I met Nima in June of 2022 at the Ironwood Writers Studio. I was there for the inaugural one of those as a counselor, and Nima was there teaching. And so we got to hang out with Ironwood students. Sarah Kate taught us how to do a few things on the dulcimer.
Sweet.
And it was really wonderful. So I bought it, and that's the summer I went and read it. It was in between Ironwood and The Flood that I had read it to my family on that camping trip.
Do you want to say the title of it so that people know?
Another Appalachia, Coming Up Queer and Indian in a Mountain Place by Nima Avashia.
You know, it's such a singular book in many ways. I think because of the conversational, welcoming nature of it, but also because, like, I mean, this was a really important story to be written in this region because there's a dearth of them. And yeah, it's just, shouts out Nima. It's an incredible book. Yeah. And it definitely was another one of those eye-opening moments for me where you think you've read a lot, but you're always missing something. Mm-hmm. So this is why it's really important for people to share, hey, why don't you take this? This might open your eyes a little bit more. And that's what what her book does.
I love her book in particular because, when I was out in Oklahoma, when I travel in other places, people think Appalachia is a place of just white people. And I mean, that's what you see on the news. That's the hillbilly stereotype. That's all of that. But there are so many people in Appalachia who are not white, who are not straight, who are not this stereotype that you see. And so this is such an important and beautifully done book that highlights that experience of being not white in Appalachia, of being not straight in Appalachia, of yes, we do exist here, and this is our experience. And I feel like, the more that those stories are told, the better, because Appalachia is a diverse and beautiful place, not just people who look like me. And I think that's very important for young folks here too, especially to see that and to grow up knowing that and to see representations of themselves in books, because that's something that I feel like, you were talking about when you think about literature as a white guy, like you, and growing up, in the school system, you're only handed certain things, and it's usually, those particular books. And so for me, reading this was really important, and I'd love to share it with people.
And I just think this is such a good one for the premise of Books on the Bed, because if you want to talk about someone who, again, when I went to Tuskegee and met Curtis, that started this whole thing, I was in Minnesota at the time. So you got a Minnesota guy coming into Tuskegee, Alabama. And so Curtis shares these stories that I would have never heard of about Alabama and the people that made Tuskegee. And I think this is a similar book where if you want someone who might not be from here to leave with something in their book bag, theoretically, this is a book where they're going to go home and it's going to change their mind. It's going to change the way they look at an entire region and open them up to saying, hey, what else could I read? This is a curiosity-inducing book, no doubt about that.
Yeah, and actually, I think I want to read a little section from the chapter called Present Life Hair. It's just like the beginning that sort of addresses some of that. My mother says the hair we are born with isn't our own. It belongs to the person we were in our past life. So what does it mean that my first head of hair, the soft, bronzy black ringlets of my toddlerhood, is still her favorite? Once shorn as dictated by Hindu ritual to release the old soul and make room for the new, the hair that grew back on my head was darker, coarse, and frizzy. It tangled easily, and my mother's efforts to untangle it each week, sans conditioner, a product yet undiscovered in our immigrant household, brought me to tears each time. We were strangers in West Virginia, the state where my parents decided to make a home. Strange because of our immigration status, strange because of our anomalous brown skin in an outstandingly white state. My parents could not control much about how the world would receive my sister and me, the racism, the xenophobia, the sheer ignorance about our culture and faith. But what they could control, they did, our appearance. Keeping our heads down, being well-groomed, not standing out any more than we already did, they thought would keep us safe.
Can't say it any better than that.
Yeah.
There are so many stories that you hear where parents try to do the exact same thing. And what sucks about this is it's like you think you cause your own problems by not doing that, by not being well-groomed, by not conforming. But it's like no one should ever put that on you.
Yeah.
And
well, it's kind of like, you know, you were talking about earlier when we were talking about the lightning bugs and making them more human-like. Well, it's like, well, now we're taking these cultures and making them more white. When in reality, we should be celebrating the things that make them different and beautiful.
And I think, they come into these communities where they know they have to do that to survive.
Absolutely.
And I was talking to Naomi Shihab Nye about her father. And one of the beautiful things about him was how he'd go around the neighborhood. You know, he's Palestinian and he's in Texas. And he'd walk around to everybody and say, "Good morning, my friend." And, you know, as kids, they'd be embarrassed. Like, you don't even know this person. He's like, "Yeah, but I could be their friend."
Yeah.
But it's also painful and sad to know how many people probably judged him and did, no doubt.
Absolutely.
And at the time, he was a journalist in Dallas. There was hardly any journalists from the Middle East that were getting recognition, even jobs. So, like, there's something beautiful about this, where someone can be themselves, but when they have to reduce themselves to their, you know, to fit into this mold, to belong to a community, it's like that's not a community at all. That's, at least it's not one that should be celebrated. And I think, even I live in Franklin. I struggle with this a lot. People are scared to come there.
Yeah.
It's just a fact. And I have a lot of friends who live in bigger cities that are people of color or queer people, and it crosses my mind every time. How is where I live going to feel to these people? Or how can I make it more welcoming? But sometimes you can't control that.
Yeah.
Because they're just some really ugly people. And
Well, and people latch on to those ideas because they think that it's keeping them safe to hold on to these, like, notions and thoughts and whatever. I think they get so attached to it that it's really hard, like any conversation that you try to have, if it goes toward that, they're so, like, they just hold on to it so tightly. They're so determined.
They're so scared of what happens when they let go of it.
Yeah.
And they don't understand on the other side of that, it is way better to have different cultures flourish in a place that it seems like they wouldn't, than to have the opposite. They're scared because what it means is they have to change.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think I remember, like, the first writer I think I remember reading addressing issues like that was Amy Tan. And I read The Joy Luck Club many, many years ago when I was a kid. And, you know, I've been very fortunate that I grew up in a house with parents who were willing to have conversations with me, to acknowledge that these things were issues, to, my dad is a Vietnam War veteran. It's only been recently that I found out, like, he was in Chicago during the riots in Chicago. He was put there as a young man who was drafted before he went to Vietnam in 1969. And so he had all of this experience that he could have gone the other way, but he chose to see it as this shouldn't have happened to anyone. Yeah. And this shouldn't be happening. And so the way that I was raised.
But what a watershed moment for someone from Kentucky to be in the middle of that. Right before they get shipped off to war.
And I didn't know that until the Black Lives Matter movement, because Dad doesn't talk about Vietnam very often, and I don't like to bring it up to him unless he brings it up, because, he has post-traumatic stress disorder, which now looking back, there are moments in my childhood when I'm like, wow, I bet that's, like, I didn't know as a child, but that's what was going on. But he talked about it when he was watching this protest. He's like, this is the same exact issue from then. He's like, we have not grown at all. And people want to say, like, oh, we're so much better. We don't have the racism anymore. And it's like, but we do. It is still so deeply embedded that those riots are the same issues that we are still trying to combat. And I mean, that's the system that our country is built on.
And it's the same for immigrants and queer people in Appalachia too.
Absolutely.
Like, we have to change. But shouts out Nima for giving us a really important story that is a great selection for Books on the Bed. One that we have at City Lights Bookstore too in Silva, if you're If you're ever there, you should buy it. I'll sell it to you for sure. There's multiple. Well, I would sell all of these, but let's go to number 4.
Okay, so I think that's a good transition into this book, When Stars Rain Down by Angela Jackson Brown.
I was not expecting this one. I am very excited to hear you talk about this.
So I really, really love this book, and it also deals with issues of race that are obviously still currently issues in our country and things that people find it difficult to talk about, which makes it even more important for us to have these hard conversations, to acknowledge the racism that we are built on, the structures that we benefit from as white folks. But this book is a historical book. It follows the life of Opal and her sort of love interests. It's such a beautiful book. It's very engaging. If you like a good story and you love good character development, like this is a great book for you. It also deals with one of her love interests is her preacher's son, and the other is she cleans house for this white family, and it's the son in that family. And there's a lot of the KKK is in here. Like there's a whole lot going on in this book.
I'm curious how you came to this book.
Well, so Angela Jackson Brown and I got our MFAs at the same time at Spalding University. And so we were in the same cohort.
Didn't even know that. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and so Katerina Stoikova was also in that cohort.
What?
Yes.
That's awesome.
And so I got to know Angela there, and I was so excited for this book to come out. And she's had several more since then, but I still I love all of her work, but I adore this one. And to see... For me, to watch people that I love who have been working so hard and who are still working so hard, to watch their goals happen, to watch their dreams come true is incredible. And so for me, I think that that's one of the reasons, all the other things, anything Angela writes is well worth reading. It's wonderful. But I keep coming back to this one because it was her first big book. She had a poetry collection before this, and I feel like maybe there was another one, but this is the first big fiction work that came out. And so when it came out, I was just so excited to celebrate her and so excited to read it. And I think when I got it, I sat down, actually read it outside up here on my hill, and it's such an engaging, well done story. And I feel like anyone who writes fiction, which ironically my MFA is in fiction.
Of course it is.
It's such a different thing than writing poetry, to keep track of all of your characters and all of the things that are happening in all of these pages. And then for Angela, the historical research, the weaving in of all of the things that were happening during that time into these characters' lives, it's just gorgeous. Gorgeous. It takes place in 1936. So, it was a big deal to have those particular love interests. It's in this post-Reconstruction era town, and it follows Opal, and you get to, she's kind of coming, I think she's 16, maybe she's coming of age. I can't remember her it's been a couple years since I've read it.
Yeah, but Opal is a character that you would want to go into that world.
Yes, absolutely. You get, there's some other characters too. Her granny is in there. And I'd marked, let me find where I'd marked. I'd marked a place so I could read a little bit.
Oh, please do, yes.
I tried to do that.
I love reading. I think it helps people understand, okay, what is it exactly why would someone share this? What's the language like? What's the story like?
It talks a lot about the ideas that white people had about helping, and about some of the things that they were doing that were actually really harmful. And instead of, listening to Black people and doing the things to support them that would actually be helpful, they're doing things to make themselves look good, or they're in their own little world of privilege, and they're not really aware of the harm that they're doing, or even when they're told, they don't seem to care in some instances. And so Opal is having a hard time, especially when she's interacting with her love interest that is the son of the family that she cleans for.
Oh, okay.
And so his name is Jimmy Earl. Let's see where I'd intended to start it. Okay, Bean. Lori Beth came by here yesterday to apologize to you for the article, he said as he picked up another towel from the basket. She wanted to go over to your house, but I told her not to. She didn't mean to hurt you. She was just trying to help. She cried so hard I thought she was going to make herself sick. Her daddy has forbidden her from writing for the newspaper indefinitely. She is truly upset that she hurt you. I couldn't say anything at first, mainly because I was furious that he would come telling me some mess like that. First, he was trying to plead the case for his cousin not being the one who hurt me, and then here he was making excuses for that nosy white girl, Lori Beth Parsons. I didn't care none about how Lori Beth Parsons was feeling, and I was angry that he cared. Finally, I reached over and snatched the towel from his hands. White folks always thinking they know what's best for colored folks, I muttered as I hung the towel on the clothesline. Then, when they mess up, they try to act all sorry. She did this to herself and to me, not to mention to my family. She can take her I'm sorry somewhere else. Bean, Jimmy Earl said, his face looking hurt. Why would you say that? All white folks aren't bad. I'm not bad, and Lori Beth isn't either. You know this. You and I have been friends since you were in diapers. Lori Beth thought she was doing the right thing. She was just trying to help. Once again, I was the one who was hurt, but suddenly Lori Beth Parsons was the victim. I had to work hard to measure my words. I didn't want to hurt Jimmy Earl's feelings, but he was hurting me now, and he didn't even seem to notice.
Whoa, what a line.
So she does a really good job getting into the emotional depths of how those relationships, played out during that time and how sometimes they still play out now.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I mean, I'll acknowledge, as a white person, there have been times that I wasn't aware. And I've tried to become more aware of the words that I choose to use, of the things that I do. And sometimes one will still get me. And I'm like, whoa. And it's, it's so embedded in our history because that's the foundation that we were built on as a country.
Well, even the abolition era, one of the difficult issues of that time was that so many people that had an opinion about slavery and the slave experience that were trying to get them free were white. Mm. We pretty much reference Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. That was just the difficult situation that they were in. It's like, okay, well, I'm an abolitionist. I'm white. I'm fighting to free slaves. Yeah, but like the only people in the room at this abolition meeting are white. And the only ones that are speaking on behalf of slaves are white. And so that line about white people always think they know what's best for us, that's a tale as old as time because of the fact that the people that had the power to help free slaves were white, at least in a legislative way, because there weren't black people serving in government. They didn't hold positions of power.
And even now, though, it seems to be like the narrative that we want to hold on to instead of making room for voices of folks to speak for themselves. We stand in front and say, and so that's why another reason I think it's really important to have and to read books like this from different perspectives and from perspectives of Black folks and of immigrant folks and of people who are growing up in those situations, because there are a lot of considerations that they've had to make throughout their lives that I, as a white person, have not had to make.
Yeah. And I love a good coming of age story that brings us into that. Mm-hmm. And those different perspectives, because this book kind of reminds me of the feelings, the way you're talking about it, the feelings I had reading Jamila Minnick's new Moonrise Over New Jessup, her debut about a teenage girl that ends up in this all-black town that doesn't want integration.
Oh, wow.
So we're going into this period where, integration was hell for most Southern places. It was not a good experience for people, particularly in schools. But what happens when you have a large faction of a community, an all-black community, that wants nothing to do other than some business between the white side of town? And so all of those issues kind of come to a head as well, just in a different story, but nonetheless through the eyes of a teenager that is helping us understand the complexity of something like integration, which we all thought, everybody was on board with that. No, least of all Black people. So there's always more to a story, and that's why novels can even be a really important part of understanding history and make you curious. What did I learn about this period? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think having characters that you learn about their lives and their inner thoughts and you get kind of attached to help walk you through that story and to give you some of the inner thoughts and the intricate, intimate parts of relationships and how complicated they were.
Yep.
And Angela does just a stellar job.
That's so cool. I love when people put on for their friends.
Well, and she is an incredible writer. She's just a remarkable human being, an incredible writer, and she works so hard
Yeah.
She's one of the hardest working writers that I've ever met. She really dedicates herself to her craft. And so I really admire that about her.
Well, you sold me on this one. I'm getting it when I get home. So what about number 5 here? Another friend.
Another friend. So yeah, I have some really cool friends.
You do.
I'm such a lucky person to know all of these incredible people. And I mean, there are a lot of books that I've read by people that I'll never meet that I also love. But at the moment in my life, I mean, they're not the ones that I keep going back to. And I think, all of these right now, for me, trying to pick apart my own understanding of what it means to be alive in this time in America, it's these books that I keep returning to and thinking about. And so that's what it ultimately came down to, is like what's most relevant to me right now at this time in America. And so that was my sort of, I guess, clinching point for how do I go from 30...
That's a good way to whittle it down from the main stack, the almost stack, and the almost stack.
Yes. So we've gotten here. And so this is Gay Poems for Red States by my friend Willie Edward Taylor Carver Jr.
Shouts out, Willie.
And shout out to Willie. He does so much work to try to make this world a better place. And I admire him so much for that. Just watching all the things that I can't keep up with where he's at. He's always somewhere fighting the good fight, doing the good work, to make it safe for our queer young folks and to make it a better world for all of us. And so I admire that. And this book, I feel like no matter who you are, this book's relatable, because there are all things that, like, there's still some things that I may never share about myself, and things that, like, I wish I was brave enough or felt like I could share. And I feel like we all have some of those things in our childhood. So whether you're queer or not, there are things you can relate to in this about, what parts of yourself do you feel like it's okay to share, and what parts are you made to feel like you have to hide? And it's almost the same as, like, having to dress in your nicest clothes or would look a certain way. And so it doesn't matter who you are or where you're coming from. There's some kind of standard that you're expected, or box that you're expected to fit into to be accepted within the realm of our, like, society and culture here. And I feel like in Appalachia in particular, if you are queer, there are so many more things that you're navigating about who you are, and about, even what you're told that is not only not acceptable, but, like, you're going to burn in hell.
Well, the church component in Appalachia makes this even more of an intense topic, because, I mean, I grew up Catholic in the Midwest, which is, in its own way, a difficult religion to grow up in if you're different. But I think moving to Appalachia and meeting a lot of queer people who live in my community even, you get even more of a keen sense of just how powerful the church is in terms of you figuring out, well, who am I, and how do I be this person in this space? Can I? Do I have to leave to ever be truly happy? But also how painful that is, that you might have to come to that realization that no one will love you for you here. Yeah.
And to be in a religion where you're constantly and consistently told that not only can you not be who you are, but you're damned for it. And to think about, like, being a child in that space. And I feel like Willie does such a good job of weaving in and out of, like, childhood experiences and adolescent experiences, and the people who offered him comfort and support amid all these things that were happening, as he was growing up. And there's just so many poems in this book that I love, that I return to, that I want to celebrate. And I should have marked the one. There's one called Scientist, where he talks about a bone that he found, and his teacher, he said, Mrs. White told us that we were all scientists even though we were only in 4th grade. And that's the first line to the poem. And he talks about finding this bone and thinking it's this dinosaur bone, and how she, helps him document it and measure it and write to this scientist, include pictures to be like, can you, help us identify what this is? And at the end of the poem, the scientist wrote back, said he's taken the time to write you a letter and calls you his associate. Mrs. White smiled so wide at me, her mouth pulled her skin tight around her mandible, creating an orbital path between it and joy-pinched eyes, around the exact point where her eyeglasses rested on her nose. I asked her if she knew all along it was a horse. What I knew all along, she said, is that you are a scientist. And so it just that kind of teacher, like the fact Willie does a beautiful job of seeing humans in the incredible things that they do in small ways, like that teacher who took the time to sit down and help him measure and take pictures and document and write to this scientist to be like, well, let's find out, because it's how you do scientists. And so she's like, I know you're a scientist, you're doing science, and does it and helps him do that. And like he does that with other folks in all of his writing. And he has a book coming out next year called Tore All the Pieces.
Sweet.
Which I can't wait for. I want to talk about that one because I've gotten to read it.
Oh, that's so cool.
And as much as I love Gay Poems for Red States, like, oh my gosh, Tore All the Pieces is...
Yeah, that good.
It does this thing where he has woven together prose and poetry and sort of this hybrid genre book. And he explores, like, he really, really gets the people in Appalachia. Like, I know those people. And he does dialogue. I think the only other person I've seen do dialogue that well is Robert Gipe.
Wow. High praise.
And so I'm just so excited for that book to be out in the world. So I hope it's okay with Willie that I'm already talking about it. I think it is.
So.
It's
I
gotta,
think so. We're not doing any reveals.
I forgot what date it's set to come out, but it is 2026.
Ooh, can't wait.
So
That's awesome.
I'm just so excited for that to be in the world because it deals with... It's like Gay Poems is like a springboard for that. Like it deals with queerness, it deals with poverty, it deals with substance abuse. It's like the people. Like that's what gets me about Willie's writing is like the way that he captures people, and not just for like their bad choices. It's not just like here is this human being, and he really makes them seem human because of the parts that he chooses to accent about the beautiful things they do, like that teacher.
Yeah.
And so I love that so much about his writing. But my favorite poem in here is Biscuit Girl.
Oh, this is a good one.
Can I read it? Or
Yeah, of course.
Biscuit Girl. Making biscuits is for girls. Well, you sure as heck could have fooled me. Before I even learned to sing the alphabet, I could make flour, milk, butter, or grease, sing, hum, chant, rhyme, and even shout if I'd had baking powder. Butter transforms everything into love between your teeth and your tongue. It's the kind of love that keeps sending you straight home after work, shortening drifts with you through the atmosphere, but when you get up too high, you can't smell the weekend fat of home. I can make biscuits drop like fat, dumpy stalactites, willingly jumping to their deaths from an ambivalent spatula, and I can roll out multiple-choice standardized biscuits that stand waiting for further instructions, and I can command them to rise from a sea of butter until their crusts harden like carbohydrate continents in a casserole Pangea. Why, I can even spoon them and plunge them into soups one right after the other, so flawlessly and effortlessly that someone might call one a dumpling. As teenagers who worked at McDonald's, we were sometimes assigned shifts during breakfast on the weekends. They said I couldn't be the biscuit girl because, well, I wasn't a girl. But that didn't stop me from carefully observing the process or from taking over one day when Rachel called in sick. I was biscuit girl every weekend after that.
So good.
So good. I love it. I love it because when we get the opportunity to do the things we love and to be who we are, well, then that's such a beautiful thing. And then when people around us can acknowledge it, it's even better. This is just if people haven't read Gay Poems for Red States, like it's really good. It's really beautiful.
Also have it at City Lights. I will send it to you. You know, we got to support our own here in Appalachia, and it's really cool that he has another book coming out because right now I think these books coming out by authors, they're many reasons of celebration, and the more we have come out, the better right now. Yeah. I think books are going to be one of our saving graces through this administration and general hellscape of politics and climate that we're living in. So the more that we can get people like Willie, all of these authors out there. I know too, pretty sure Anne's closing in on the end of a new book.
Oh, is she? Oh my gosh.
That's I don't want to say any more because I don't know the timeline. We never know the timeline with these things.
Yeah.
But I do know that she has been working on something. And this, though, I got to say, okay, strange as this weather has been, and Pancake, one of the most significant novels I've ever read in my life. I am so glad that someone finally picked it. And because she was on Books on the Bed last season.
Yeah, I have been so deeply impacted by this book and by her work in general. And I hadn't read this until a couple of years ago. And I had it on my shelf since before, like when it first came out, I had bought it at Coffee Tree Books many years ago and kept it on my shelf and moved it around with me. And a couple years ago, I finally was like, I need to read this book. And I pulled it off and read it. And I was like, why hadn't I read this sooner?
Right.
Like, why have I not read this sooner? And then I got to meet Anne at ASA this year. And I was just like, oh.
Yeah, she's my hero.
I admire her work so much. And I've actually used a line from this book as an epigraph for a poem that I've written recently. And actually, I was looking for something to read from it, and then I ran out of time because it was this morning. And
you could pick a page and just start there.
Yeah,
it's all worth reading.
It is. It's such a beautiful book that deals with really difficult things related to mountaintop removal and mining in Appalachia and the impact that has on the people and the communities immediately surrounding those areas. And I think, that's one of the things that is hard to write about it for so many reasons. But she does such a beautiful job of balancing like the reality of the people in that place, the reality of what is happening without getting too sentimental, if that makes sense. Like, it's not just droning on about how awful this is, but she shows that to you, like in the characters and in
through the
scenes.
lives of children.
Yes.
That's the thing that made the book for me.
Yes, like the fact that she could write, because you alternate perspectives in this book, and the chapters that are written from the perspectives of children blew me away because it is so difficult to write. To me, anyway, like it's difficult to write from the perspective of a child in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
And she
knocks it out of the park.
Yes.
I mean, I can't. So I would say this has to be it would be pushing The Good Lord Bird and Even As We Breathe is the most sold book, but that I've personally sold to people. I mean,
wow.
There are people that come in the store, have never heard of Anne Pancake, and they leave with it. That's one of those books that I can sell to anybody. And one of my points that I drive home is that it is a family perspective, one that comes from more children than adults.
Yeah.
And some of the adults even only have one chapter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Avery and Mogi. And so most of what you're getting are these completely disparate experiences of children in the same family.
Yeah.
Because they all have different personalities and perspectives and feelings about where they're from and living life. And so it just feels so real.
Yeah, I feel like it's so relatable to like how I grew up with my cousins.
Yeah.
Running around and playing up in Granny's Holler and in the creek. And then like, I'm sure my experience and the things I remember about that are going to be real different from the way my cousins look at it. And so the way that the characters go back and forth here in this book and in this experience and the things that are happening, it's just beautifully done.
And I don't know I don't have children, but as a mother, this had to be even deeper to read, knowing that your children, they're not growing up in the same place as Anne did in West Virginia, but there is. I mean, these issues are ubiquitous. So your children are understanding climate change and gun violence and all of these things. And so it had to be really powerful to read a story that you could even see maybe your children in these characters.
Absolutely. I'm sure you noticed when you turned up my road, there's 2 giant rock quarries right before you get to my house. And there's actually another one at the back of my property, and there's a high wall at the back of my property here because they're not required to do any kind of mitigation for limestone mining. There's no reclamation required. Not in the way that coal, and even then they're not, of course they're still not doing a great job, of course, like it's all very harmful, but there's no like specific reclamation required for these types of mines. Not that it would ever put anything back the way that it was. And like I have a lot of attachment to the one before my house when we first moved here didn't exist yet. So the one right at the end of my road did, but the other one across the creek wasn't there until a couple of years ago. And so that was an old farm. When it went up for sale, it was $1 million, which we couldn't buy it. Like that's one of the things that we have tried to do. And like when we first moved back here, we had 149 acres that had belonged to Channing's dad. We'd offered to buy it from him, and he gifted it to us, which was very kind.
So then
because he'd held on to it for Channing. So then we have since bought back other pieces of Channing's granddad's original farm because it was 1,000 acres.
You said up to 300.
We have 300. around 300 right now. But that I don't remember how many acres that farm was, and that wasn't part of Channing's granddad's farm.
Right.
But we had looked at buying it because it was beautiful
'cause you
limestone
want-
cliffs.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if I had a lot of money, I would have nature preserves. I would be giving money to the Kentucky Land Trusts, to the places that are fighting to help save our natural lands and protect it from things like that. But I don't have a lot of money, so it's just what I can do when I can do it, and trying to do the best that I can. But we had looked at buying that and then couldn't, and we've bought what we could, and now we have a continuous piece of property that's not right here where the house is. Like, there's another, it's separate from this. This is about 70 acres here. And then the rest of it's on what we call the hill, which is Richardson Road.
Gotcha.
And that's where we have a cabin that we've been building, and a lot of the farm is up there. But it blows my mind to see, like, just in the 2 years that rock crusher has existed, the mountains have they've completely torn it down. And the one at the end of my road used to look like the cliff across the road from it. And Channing remembers that from his childhood. And so to think my children are already aware of that, they're already aware of that damage. They've seen the significant impact of climate, and they will talk about it. And they are angry.
Yep.
Like, they are angry, rightfully so.
Honestly, I think this street, now that I think about it driving in, with the rock quarries and then even just some of this wildness in the farms, this is like where the family is, and Strange as Weather has been. I mean, it is a very similar, vivid environment, a type of place where you're like, yeah, it is akin to this. And what you were saying about even memory of a time when it was not, torn apart or contaminated, the mother in this story remembers that.
Yeah.
The kids do not.
Yeah, and I think about that with my children a lot now, because I remember when we could play in the creeks and, and it was fine. And now I can't let my children play in the creek here.
Yeah.
Can't do it. Like, I'll take them over to, the state park at Carter Caves, and they can play in that creek. But not this one. It's too contaminated, too polluted with too many things that it's not safe for them.
Yeah.
And
but I'm really glad you brought this in, and I'm not surprised that this one resonated. I'm glad you got to meet Anne. I think people need to understand Anne Pancake is one of the greatest writers that has ever lived.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
That is not an exaggeration. Say I've read thousands of books, okay? This is easily in the 10 that have most impacted me. And she knows that because I told her a few months ago in West Virginia. I mean, it was such a beautiful conversation, because a lot of what she shared for her books on the bed were stories that can help us combat the things that tore up her hometown, her homelands. And she does it in such a way that is not petty or bitter. It's, what are the ways that we can change our entire relationship to the earth so that we can see what we're doing is horrible, even if you want to make it human-centric, because the only way that we can have healthy waterways and food and everything, again, is by reading and changing the way we think about the earth.
Okay, so this is not, I'm sorry, I'm going into
okay.
my almost stack.
That's okay.
There's this great book by E.O. Wilson called The Creation, and it battles with, this religious notion that the earth was put here for us to use as humans, and how do we reconcile that with the fact that we are tearing it apart, that it is being destroyed. And so this reconciles with whether you're religious or whether you're agnostic or whether you're atheist or whether you're whatever you are, we all need to be coming together to be better stewards. And he does a really good job exploring all of those different perspectives and reconciling them with the, if we're not on the same page here, we're doomed.
Yeah. And we're not on the same page right now. And no pun intended, reading these pages could help us get on the same page, because it's obvious to people that, and to use religion is another way to do harm to the earth and to people. I just cannot stand it. And ironically, not ironically, but there's a connection here between these, because the chapter I had Anne read from to start the episode was one of my favorite chapters ever written in a novel. And it's the Mogi chapter, where he begins talking about what he couldn't learn in church. And that he had a hard time reconciling what he was learning in church versus what the earth taught him.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe that's what made me think about this.
I don't doubt it.
Did I say the title? It's called The Creation by E.O. Wilson. And E.O. Wilson is an incredible scientist who, if you're not familiar with his work, he's worth looking up.
Yeah. Did you know Jackie, one of our booksellers at City Lights, worked for him?
No.
Because she was a biology professor
that's
at
amazing.
Western.
Okay.
But when she was up in Massachusetts, she worked for
well,
you.
that's amazing. My husband is a biology professor.
Yeah.
And so that's...
Yeah, he and Jackie would get along.
Yeah.
Like the reason we have such a great natural history, homesteading, gardening section, a big part of it is her.
Oh, well, that's incredible. I love that.
She's one of the smartest, most beautiful people, and worked for E.O. Wilson. So
well, that's awesome.
I know,
that's
pretty
good.
sweet.
Yeah. This is why that book was in my almost stack, because it's books like Strange as This Weather has been that does a good job telling those stories and helping really pull people into the lives of the people there. But then this, like E.O. Wilson's book, really kind of takes apart the more, I guess, religious and intense side of like where we're placing our beliefs, and how like we all need to be looking at this as like we are in the same place together. We're all living here. So despite what you may believe in a religious fashion, we're all suffering the same fate together.
Yep.
And so, I guess that's why I pulled that in.
I love it. I love this stack of books on the bed because there's Friends, it's Appalachian, and I think it weaves together all of what is valuable to you, the things that you love, the things you want to protect, the kinds of stories that are going to help us also be better people to each other. You read Willie Carver. How do you not have your heart shift from that? You read Strange as This Weather has been. How do you not feel for the people that are in the backyards of all of this environmental destruction? You also bring in a story that I'd never read from a friend from graduate school, and talking about the Black experience and love. Like, this is just it's an incredible collection of books, and I'm really glad you shared them. So I was wondering if we can end with a poem of yours.
Sure.
That I picked out specifically to end on.
Okay.
The Place I Indulge in Sweet Moments.
Oh, okay. Awesome. This is another one that I haven't really read at any events. So, all right. The Place I Indulge in Sweet Moments. Oh, this simple life I'm building here at the edge of this hillside, with dewberries and daylilies, rat snakes and morning glory vines twisting around every fence post. The one holding laughs after dark and peaceful solitude in the dusty rose of dawn, where I find snail shells and pine cones and circular fungal patterns in leaves, where I meet friends to look for hagstones and more rocks than I have room for in my collection. Stow away bits of wood for later projects, and our conversations fill me up with more to think about. Where I mix dough with my hands and forget coffee cups on porch rails and eat peas straight from the vine while my dog follows at my feet. Where I have cuddles at bedtime and mud finger-painted across windows and s'mores and stories and little fingers in my hair twirling to the rhythm of high-pitched hums. These small joys all stitched together, holding my heart against that great big scary world out there where not everyone has a home like this to shield them.